Doctors like us have demanding schedules, so growing our portfolio shouldn't be another burden. And the last thing we want when we take off our scrubs is a call from a tenant about an overflowing toilet. So Equity Multiple brings us streamlined access to vetted real estate investments that work for us, even when we're off the clock. And only 5% make the cut. Once we invest, a team of professionals goes to work to maximize our returns. With a minimum investment of just $5,000, diversify outside the stock market with cash flowing CRE like multifamily, industrial self-storage, and more. Welcome to modern real estate investing. Visit equitymultiple.com to learn more. That's equitymultiple.com. Hey, this is Brad Block, host of The Physician's Guide to Doctoring. This is a personal and professional development podcast for physicians where we have experts on the show that try to teach us everything we should have been learning while we were memorizing Krebs cycle. Welcome back to the podcast. On today's episode, we have a special guest, Dr. Kyan Lynch, who is an assistant professor in the Department of OBGYN at the University of Rochester, where he focuses on medical education and digital content strategy. So for all our course creators out there and anyone who's in medical education, which you're all in medical education, because you teach your patients. As the founder and CEO of ALOE Digital Solutions, Kyan builds software solutions to make the lives of the medical educators easier. With over 8 years of experience in medical education, he combines his expertise in software development, digital content strategy, and educational consulting to empower physicians to build successful personal brands and educational businesses. He also writes the MedEdge, a free weekly newsletter that provides practical tips and tools for medical educators. And you can learn more at kyanlynch.com. So Dr. Lynch, or Kai as you prefer to be called, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So let's start with your MedEd journey. Give us the short version of your journey into this very specific space.
Is the kind of story where it was like uber traditional until I took a right turn and everything since then has been non-traditional. Was the kid who knew in high school I wanted to be a doctor. All lines led there. Had a great experience in medical school at Stony Brook. Decided I wanted to do women's health, reproductive health, and also full spectrum LGBT health. And so chose family medicine. Matched in my top ranked program up here in Rochester, New York. Started, and within a couple of months, struggled with debilitating anxiety and depression. Really struggled. I was incredibly lucky, though, that I chose the program I did. Very supportive. Could not have asked for a better program director and APDs and administrators and co-residents. Took time away, got the help I needed. And while I was out, it just became clear that as scary as it was to leave medicine before I really earned any money doing this thing that I had spent a decade trying to achieve, as scary as it was to just walk away from that, it was actually scarier to me to stay. And that just spoke volumes. I left clinical practice, left residency. I started my very first job that I got out of residency. I was also lucky. It was called academic detailing for PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis for HIV and post-exposure prophylaxis, PrEP and PEP. It was a lot less well-known at that point. PrEP and PEP. We had a lot less options. We didn't have the injectables we do now. It was just the pill. And academic detailing is like the goody two-shoes version of what pharma has been doing for a long time, where you show up at a doctor's office and you bring food and, try to get them to listen to you. But I was doing it on behalf of the New York State Department of Health. And so I traveled around New York State and literally just met with clinicians.
So less of a budget. That's what you're saying. So same idea, less money.
Yeah, it was more like Panera than steak dinners, but it works. And a lot of people were relieved to know that I was one of them and I was not representing some sort of pharmaceutical company.
Yeah.
None of that. So I learned that I really loved education. I loved talking about medicine still. It wasn't that medicine as a field I had lost love for. It was just the practice of it and the responsibility for so many patients who had so few resources. I learned that I was also good at it. I'm still getting used to saying out loud things like I was good at it, but I was good at it. And I just got a ton of practice, whether it was one-on-one with a physician or to a room of hundreds doing grand rounds. I got just reps in. and really built up my understanding of how to educate, but also how to persuade. Because it's all about changing someone's behavior, going from someone who never talks about HIV to prescribing prevention for HIV. It's a big behavior change, and I was doing it through education. Moved from there to doing some work also with the CDC, where I would go into other states and help them battle the HIV epidemic and STI outbreaks through education. And then a position opened up within the Department of OBGYN here at U of R to just focus on medical education from our clerkship all the way through professional development. And I've been doing that for the last 6 years or so and absolutely love it. So again, very traditional. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And then suddenly all of that fell apart. And yet I'm incredibly grateful for all of it. I'm very lucky for how everything turned out.
I think luck might be part of it, as it is with many things, but it seems like there's a lot that you've earned there too. I always liken getting off a moving train, like stopping what we're doing in the practice of medicine to do something completely different. We're on this path. And part of the reason we got on this path is because it's a clear path.
Mm-hmm.
You go to medical school, you get into a residency, maybe a fellowship, you become an attending, and you have a job. And that's it, right? Like everything's set out for you as long as you do what you're supposed to. And to get off and do something else is like getting off of a moving train. It took a lot of courage to do what you did as well. And so I think kudos to you for all that you've accomplished.
Thank you. I certainly appreciate that. But like I said, the decision was made for me. I couldn't really imagine a future in which I was healthy and practicing medicine. And ultimately, that had to come before everything. It's going to weddings and trying to explain to people briefly that I'm just meeting for one night. They don't know me or really care. We're just seated around the table. And they ask me what I do. It was easier back when I was just a family medicine resident.
So there's so many jobs out there. Like anyone in the financial services industry, they tell me what they do. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about right now. It's doctor, lawyer, fireman, policeman, anything else. I'm going to have a tough time understanding what you do. Okay, so let's talk about this specific space, right? The medical education space. Because right now what you're doing is you are helping people build their brands within the med ed space, right? Now that you've done that, you're helping other people to do that. And so let's start off with what's specific about brand building in this space. You hear about brand building in general terms, like SEO. Yeah, but you're trying to get the attention of physicians specifically. So how is that different?
I really appreciate the question. I think I'm going to slightly change it to allow me to give more of a pitch for why I think the two go together, personal branding and med ed, which is the same question, but a slightly different spin because
Sure. Be a politician and just say what you want to say rather than the question you were asked.
No, you asked a beautiful question. I'm hoping that the physicians listening don't think of it as a foreign concept, but realize that it makes perfect sense and that they're like already starting a race miles ahead of other people out there. They're just not aware of it. So there are a ton of people on any social media platform, on all of the podcast charts, on YouTube, etc., who are building their own personal brand and are selling courses, content, communities, or are using affiliate links and influencing people to sell products. And usually what those people have to do is they have to decide where an audience is, build up credibility enough to make that audience believe them, and then they can start actually taking hold and doing something. Physicians are this group of people that have an incredibly valuable, hard to access, and desirable knowledge set that they're just walking around with, because we're not even just talking about book knowledge. They're just some things that you don't learn unless you're at the bedside and see what it's like to try to find a vein when it's hard. They're just things you had to live through. And you went through all of that and you have this vast amount of knowledge that people really want. And the internet and all of these tools we have make it increasingly easy for you just to open up a little bit and share that and become known for someone who has the information that you already have, to have patients trust you more, to have colleagues recognize your work and maybe reach out to you for a research collaboration or to join forces with you in an educational endeavor. I think that this concept of a med ed brand, of being someone known for educating people about medicine, it's right there for the taking for physicians. And I also think it's where all of this is headed. I think that the CV as we currently know it, the promotional CV, is just already outdated, and building your presence out in the open online as an expert because you are one just sets you up for success in so many different areas of your life.
It sounds like what you're saying almost is that the link tree is your new CV, right?
Yeah.
Here's my QR code with all my stuff linked up in there. Make it easy for everybody and in a way that you want it presented.
Absolutely.
I need to do that. I would be honored to help you make that happen. Awesome.
Yeah. And it's easier than ever before to do that. I will admit I've taken extra time to teach myself how to, code things and program, but honestly, to set up the kind of thing you're talking about, even if you don't use Linktree, you use something that looks a little bit more put together and professional and static, its own real online shop that is just, you can use probably Card is what I would recommend, CARD. I think it's like $19 for a year. And you use a template, you type in your name, and you're ready to go. So it is just a layup that I want more physicians to know they can access. And even academic institutions are going to recognize that when you're a frequently invited speaker to events because people are finding you more online, that's going to help you in your promotion. It's not just digital natives who are out there trying to mix things up. It's just how people are recognized and noticed and get to participate more in the world, both of medicine and more broadly. Get out there.
All right. So that makes sense to me for physicians as authority when patient facing. And I think, that was a great hype session for those who have imposter syndrome, right? They're like, I didn't write the chapter in Harrison's, so I'm not the authority. No, you are. You're a thought leader. You know why you're a thought leader? Because people come to you every day asking you advice, right? So I get that piece. But then there's the physician to physician space. Right? Which is a little different. And how do you establish yourself as an authority there, right? Because there are a lot of coaches out there, there are business coaches, there are life coaches, and they're trying to establish themselves in this physician-facing space. How do they do that?
I think the way you do that is to focus a little bit less, and this is, I think, foreign to physicians, is to focus a little bit less on the book knowledge, literally saying, I did an RCT that found that sodium does this now or something. It's less about that. Education is so much about communication and about finding the right way to explain to someone at the exact right time for them when they need it. And so you can be literally the foremost expert in the world on a very specific medical topic. If you can't communicate it to other people in the way they need to hear it, it doesn't matter in terms of medical education. So you might not have this very deep, very specific knowledge on a topic. Maybe you're more of a generalist, an internist. And you're also someone who follows sports really closely. Maybe you're the guy that uses sports metaphors to finally explain certain concepts that other people don't get, right? It's bringing yourself into it and using that as a tool to communicate. And because the internet is the internet, you don't have to find 20 people at your one institution who are interested in sports metaphors explaining concepts. There's literally billions of people out there that you could reach, and I guarantee you will find an audience that will be delighted to follow you and either pay you or ingest your content in a way that you get paid otherwise. It's not necessarily that you have to have this mile deep knowledge of a very specific thing that only you are the authority on. It's how can you bring that into the world and show up in spaces so that people actually learn from it and take away what they need to take away from it. If you are maybe a primary care physician, you don't necessarily need to know everything about dialysis and how you're going to choose to. It's been a long time since I've been in a dialysis unit, right? You don't need to know all of the details.
I hear what you're saying, right? However, you need to be able to communicate what the patient needs to know and what they need to know about it. Not every last glomerular. Yes, I'm an otolaryngologist. Sorry. I don't remember that either. Okay. Yeah, I think that's perfect because I'm picturing a lot of my colleagues in this space. And the ones who really put themselves out there are the ones that are excellent communicators. And so you don't need to be the one that wrote the trial, but you need to be the one that can communicate what needs to be communicated in the trial. So if you're trying to work on your abilities there, work on SciComm, work on science communication, listen to some I've got some excellent back episodes on science communication. And so that'll help you when building yourself. And I had an episode recently, I'm not sure if it's going to come out before or after you, with Dr. An Sung, who talked about finding her superpower. She asked a bunch of people around her. So rather than figuring it out yourself, like you said, sports metaphors for explaining health conditions, right? You might not realize that you're really good at it. So ask a couple of your close friends what you're really good at, and that can help you figure out what your niche really is.
Absolutely. Or be willing to actually take to heart what people have already been telling you, which I think is another thing that we all struggle with.
Yes.
Right? It was the one line in the evaluation that said you needed to read more that you focused on, not all of the other glowing comments, right? That's one of our shared pathologies as physicians. If you think about it for a second, you're like, man, every single one of my colleagues comes to me when they have questions about billing. I wonder if other people out there have questions about billing and might like the way I explain it. So it might also just be willing to accept the flowers that people have already given you and recognize that there's something special there.
My wife and I were talking about that the other day because we're not great at taking compliments. Like, oh, thank you so much for emptying the dishwasher. Oh, actually, there was a pot in there that I really needed. So I just figured I would, like, instead of you're welcome, right? So same idea there. Okay. But a lot of the content that we discuss, and this is a SciComm question, a lot of the content we discuss can be pretty mundane. So what are some of your secrets for adding some, can't believe I'm saying this, pizzazz?
Jazz hands.
No, those were spirit fingers.
Oh, sorry. There we go.
There you go.
Yeah. I think that's obviously a really good question. And I must preface it by saying it's going to be so much about the medium and the audience you're trying to reach. The way that you can pizzazz up a video is just going to be different than a long form essay and everything in between. And the audience that you're speaking to is going to be different as well. I think that the more specific you can make your content to the audience that is going to read it, it doesn't have to be laugh out loud funny or a highly produced video. But if it speaks to someone and makes them stop and say, wait, this is exactly the problem I had last Tuesday, and now this person is helping me solve it, it will capture attention. So I think we often confuse like entertainment or I guess pizzazz for quality or for something that really is going to capture someone's attention and make them engage with you. And personally, like I would actually sign up for a physical newsletter that came to my house if it gave me solutions to the problems I really had over a bunch of newsletters that come to email that don't solve the problem. Really being focused in on what your audience needs and wants and how you communicate it to them is going to be the backbone of anything. I think then beyond that, a lot of it is also thinking about yourself as the recipient. We see this all the time, right? If you ask someone what their favorite grand rounds are, it's the one when someone was really engaging or told a story or used patient scenarios that were real life that felt, I'm going to walk out of here and take care of that patient. And then everyone gets up at the podium and does the same thing where we go through trial by trial and bury people in data because it's just what you do. And if you spend a little bit more time thinking about when I'm in the seat, when I'm learning, what is it that captures my attention and keeps me engaged? That goes a long way. So worrying a little bit less about making the video pizzazzy or making sure you're cracking jokes left and right. If you're trying to reach a very specific audience and enact behavior change in them, if you just want to get a lot of followers and likes, that's something different. But if you want to engage learners who are engaging with your content, it's really about understanding who they are, what they're actually curious about, and delivering it in a way that they can actually ingest it.
The pain point and how you're solving for it. It seems like that's it right there. What is their pain point? How are you solving for it? And the jokes, I feel like that was specifically directed at me. Don't appreciate it. I try to make a lot of jokes.
It's actually a reflection of my sense of inadequacy. If we can't all be you, cracking these genius jokes, having everyone on the floor, some of us have to find other ways.
Now you're making me feel badly about that. But I'm really enjoying this. This is great. Okay. So the next question is, are you everywhere or are you making a stand in one specific place?
I am all in on LinkedIn right now. And it took me a while to get to that point because I think the common sense is I'm supposed to be everywhere. I'm supposed to be everywhere that my people are, or I have to be on Instagram, or I have to, like, there's these preconceived notions of this is the one platform that if you actually want to make it, you have to go on this. And I just think that it's really terrible advice that gets out there far too much, or that we accept too much. I think the most conservative number I've seen for the least popular platform that you could think of as the major ones, the major players, is LinkedIn. And again, the most conservative estimate I've seen recently is that they have 330 million active users. And so to me, it's if you can't find someone who likes your stuff out of 330 million potential people, then it doesn't matter if you're reaching 1 billion. You got to just work on your content. The number one thing I would say is the platform that you will actually use and show up on consistently and being interested in developing more skills and growing on, that's the platform for you. I built this like Cosmo quiz kind of algorithm for my community members, the meta brand builders that I can share with you if you want, that helps guide people who aren't so familiar with the platforms. Really starting off, the number one question is, do you like being on video? Do you feel confident on video? Yes or no?
No.
And it's okay if you don't.
Yeah. This is a great point because I went to a couple of talks where they talked about growing your Instagram following. And it was like all the stuff that they said, like someone was taking a video of themselves scrubbing before surgery, but they weren't actually scrubbing before surgery because then they had to touch their phone to stop recording and then they had to re-scrub. And like, I can't envision myself doing that. making snarky comments on threads, I can envision myself doing. So I'm starting to grow my brand on threads. And then the Instagram I have someone that she will take the clips and she'll put it up on Instagram and put it everywhere so people can see the clips of whatever episode's coming out. But what am I actively engaging in? What am I seeing myself on? I think that's an excellent way to put it. Stop feeling bad because you're not doing dances on TikTok. If it's not your thing, it's not your thing. Don't force it. Find what works for you organically. That's going to absolve a lot of people of guilt, or maybe I'm just projecting. I don't know.
I felt it, so I have to admit that too. Like I set up my Instagram and exactly what you would predict to happen, just like you were counseling a patient, motivational interviewing. Okay, every week you're gonna take a mile hike, and they do it for the first couple of weeks and then they trail off because that was never going to be the thing that works for them. Right? Is maybe let's go around the block once a day. And so for me, instead of the Instagram, I'm going to be posting really interesting visuals constantly. I really like writing and I really like reading. So LinkedIn just makes so much more sense for the way I like to produce and take in content. And it's worked beautifully for me. I've made great connections like with you. So why fight a good thing?
Love it. Okay. So you are clearly very tech savvy. Right? So what are some useful tools or technologies that you recommend for creating content?
I appreciate that question too. I'm going to start by just saying that I want it to be clear that if you aren't into tech and you're listening to this podcast, I don't want you to feel as though that's a barrier for you to get into this world. Because first of all, there's a lot of platforms out there that are exceedingly user-friendly now, whereas they used to be more challenging. Back with MySpace, you had to know how to code for it to not look terrible. Now, a lot of those limitations are removed, but you don't have to have a tech of 10 things to break into this, especially since the people listening to this have amazing knowledge and content ready made. They just need to literally hit publish and let other people see it. That being said, I am a bit of a techie. I love seeing what's out there and trying out new things. I mentioned to you already CARD, C-A-R-D. No affiliation with them whatsoever, but it is just the fastest way that you can set yourself up with a storefront on the internet that looks really nice, that is easy to maintain. Their claim to fame is that they're single page sites. So you don't have to battle with complex navigation. You're not going to accidentally get yourself stuck where you have 300 pages and now you have to constantly go through and make sure you've updated the information because you just changed the name of your practice or switched to a different institution. Setting up a place on the internet that is yours that you can drive people to and connect back to, I would use CARD or something similar to that. And then I have a newsletter, as you mentioned. It's a free weekly newsletter for medical educators. I use Beehive, B-E-H-I-V. I tried out a few different options. Are you not familiar with that one?
No, we use MailChimp, but just the spelling was what I made a face.
Yeah. Again, I don't work for them in any capacity.
Not an affiliate.
Unaffiliated, but it had a nice set of tools that I wanted for myself in starting a newsletter. MailChimp is an email provider. Beehive, Substack, some of these other platforms out there now are really built around a sort of full spectrum newsletter concept. The difference between email marketing and newsletters, email marketing is you want to send information out to your followers, the people who gave you their email address because you've got a new podcast you want them to listen to, or because you're coming to their town to give a presentation or whatever. Whereas a newsletter is like appointment television. It's going to come every week. It has maybe a standing format that everyone knows to expect, and it's on a very specific topic they want to learn about. And so you want something that can definitely help you keep track of who's subscribing, really good metrics on who's opening it, who's clicking on links, who's not, how can you re-engage them, a lot of automation so that if you sign up for my newsletter, you get an automatic email welcoming you and asking you to reply to me and telling me a little bit about who you are. And I read those and I respond to them.
Yeah.
That also helps to make sure that the next email actually does show up in your inbox. I also send a couple email if you subscribe after the newsletter goes out on Sunday up until Thursday, because it's going to be a while before you hear from me again. And I want to give you a little bit more information since you signed up. So that is something that I was able to set up with just visual programming, just drag and drop onto the workflow. You can embed polls in your newsletters directly through Beehive. So I frequently have a trivia question every week, just a medical education quiz, and people can click on it and find out if they're right or wrong. And all of that is done through this one platform. So that's why I chose Beehive. But there are other ones out there that people can use.
Fantastic. We're rapidly coming to a close. This is an opportunity to just give one more piece of advice to a physician audience that's trying to, get themselves out there in medical education, already amazing advice, like pick your social media platform based on what you would use. You are an authority, lean into what you're good at and what you're going to enjoy. But any other bits of advice for the audience?
I very much appreciate that. I think that right now, my biggest goal is to help physicians regain a sense of autonomy and control over their lives and over their own authority. I think there's a lot of trying to make all physicians seem basically the same at a specific institution. And even though we all had to go through very standardized training and hit our milestones, you are a one-of-a-kind person. And you have knowledge and skills that are unique and people want to know about them. So I think it was beaten out of us a little bit to have any sort of personality, right? It's a little bit of you're supposed to be a blank slate and not upset your attending or anyone else.
Yeah.
And now's the time to let yourself be you. You don't have to be wild and crazy and dressing up and doing TikTok dances. If you like sports, talk about sports and medicine. If you like music, maybe that influences how you talk about medicine. Maybe you like writing in a more storytelling format. Maybe you don't. But show up as yourself and reclaim a sense of individualism in medicine because people want to get helped by other people. They want to trust people, not institutions. And we have all these tools now to allow the world to see us as individuals again. And so I just hope everyone rises up to that and lets themselves be seen.
I love that. And I love how the theme that keeps coming up in this interview is finding ways for you to be you. What lights you up? What do you enjoy doing? And that's what you put out in the world. And we didn't mention burnout once in this interview. That will certainly help. I love it. So if people want to learn more about you, certainly find you on LinkedIn. That's how I found you. And then your website, kyanlynch.com. That's KYANLYNCH.com. And Dr. Lynch, Kai, thank you so much for your time and your expertise and all that you're doing to help our profession.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks for listening. I have a favor to ask. You listened to the episode until the end, which means you either fell asleep or you really liked the episode. So please share it or like it or comment on a social media post or write us a 5-star review. Something. It would really help me out. And maybe what you learned from this episode can help someone else too. The views expressed in this episode are those of the interviewer and interviewee and don't represent the views of their employer or even their significant other. Even though the magic of podcasting make it sound like I'm talking directly to you. This is not a doctor-patient relationship, and this is not medical advice, or financial advice, or really any advice. Thank us again for listening to The Physician's Guide to Doctoring.